Glenn Campbell and Southern Nights. Opposite me is a man who is a piece of living history. He is Bill Smith, 85 years of age. Not much older than me, Bill.
No.
Good to see you. And we'll be talking specifically about Birth of the Black Panthers. It's a book about and dedicated to the memory of Bill's late brother, Flying Officer Len Smith, DFM, who was killed, ironically, Bill, after the end of the war in 48.
He was leading a Battle of Britain display at Lucas in Fife, just the other side of St Andrews. And his fiancée was watching the display. And as he pulled out at 300 feet, his plane broke up, a Mark 19. And eventually, the following year, I married that fiancée.
Right, we'll talk about that and how indeed you took on your late brother's son as your own and
Yes.
raised him with his wife.
Yes.
Your wife is here with you
No.
today. Not Mary, of course,
No.
but a new wife.
Well, we're not married.
Well, I'm not sure I can condone that, Bill.
No. Well, this lady lost her husband
I see.
soon after I moved into a high-rise flat where she was.
Yeah,
And we met, and we've supported one another ever since.
that's a wonderful thing
She's
to
a great
do.
help to me, and I'm trying to help her.
And that's the way it should be. I
Yes.
think that's wonderful. But it is a wonderful tale. It's a tale of adventure and courage and romance.
Yes.
And you can read that all in Birth of the Black Panthers. I'm not trying to get rid of Bill, but he will be on for a complete interview after the news at 3. Bill was going to read from his book, and there are so many choices here. What is your favourite extract? What sums up your brother's courage and the sort of man that he was?
One of the actions that he was in, he fought against German, Italian and Japanese, and he was probably the only English pilot with serving within the same squadron to win over all those 3 enemy aircraft.
I mean, this is stuff that history's made of. When your brother Len meets up with a Focke-Wulf 190 or 190,
Yes.
I suppose, on the toe of Italy, just where
Yes.
near to Sicily, I suppose.
Yes.
That was an encounter, wasn't it? That was a
Yes, yes.
fight in the air.
He was in a Mark 9 Spitfire with another Mark 9, and they were covering the Mark 5 Spitfires below them when they saw bombs go off in the water, just missing our ships, fortunately. And all this time, he said, we were diving down after these buggers. And at 460 miles per hour, he managed to get within 400 yards. And instead of going round a hill, he said he tried to get over the top.
Well, I tell you what, let's have the travel news. Bill, I'll be right back to you. Okay, in a way, today's show is all about history. Some recent history, which you'll hear and be fascinated by from Bill Smith in a moment, talking about the war years, principally, memories of his late brother, Flying Officer Len Smith, DFM, and also a book dedicated to ex-Sergeant Ray Johnson, still with us, 92 years of age. And we'll be discovering what it was like to be a young person back in those times, and also Tudor times, and the Michaelmas Fair coming up in Southampton. That will be in our last hour. But first, a little bit of Frank Smith, our inspirational guest. An ex-paratrooper and a man who's written a couple of books, actually. Both of them, well, one's available now. The other one, which is Bill's memoirs, will be published shortly. But the first book, Birth of the Black Panthers, is dedicated to his late brother, Flying Officer Len Smith, DFM. Bill, welcome back, and thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you, Richard.
Your brother was, what, 7 years older than you?
Yes, that's correct.
And you really looked up to him, I suppose.
Well, he became my hero in any shape or form. He used to take me swimming where I couldn't swim. I just laid down the shallow end, and he would be doing swallow dives off the top board. He'd take me roller skating, and I hung onto the rail all the way around the side while he danced with the girls in the middle of the floor. So, yes, he was very much my hero in so many respects, and that was long before he could fly a Spitfire. He was very good athletically. He was a great artist, and he became the Squadron artist, of course. So I had a lot of material in which to apply and make him my hero in the book.
Were you aware, or would you say it's fair to say, that you were perhaps closer to Len than you were to your dad, maybe?
In probability I was, because my dad was working away. My mother died when I was 9 months old, so he was widowed, and he was working for the Greater London Council away most of the time. Although I didn't see a lot of my brother, because I was brought up by my eldest sister, he became very much my mentor.
Now, this book, Birth of the Black Panthers, to what does that title refer, Bill?
Well, it refers to a black cat that was painted on the side of the Spitfires when they reached Burma. And because my brother was the Squadron artist, he discussed the idea with a couple of other pilots, and he was the one that painted it on the Spitfire. And once it got there, of course, they were able to create stencils from it and paint all the rest of the Spitfires in the squadron. This was all agreed by their commanding officer, Harry Hoff, of course, at the time.
Now, you were, what, 12 at the outbreak of war in September 39?
I was indeed.
And your brother must have been 19.
He was. We were all born in Bow, one of the poorest areas of London, and you won't get many Spitfire pilots that were born from an area like that. We all left school at 14, but when he was 17, in 1938, or just before he was 18, he managed to join the Civil Air Guard. That was CAG, and a friend of his, used to take him to the airfield whenever they were flying by his car, and he managed to fly on a puss moth because it was all paid for by the government. All you had to supply was your goggles and your speaking tube. So he flew a puss moth, and he soloed in a course record of 5.5 hours. And that helped him, obviously, when he went before his selection board for pilot training, because of his Civil Air Guard ideas that he had beforehand.
You know, when you were talking about that you and your brother and I, so many of us, came from working class backgrounds, was it more moneyed people that tended to go on to fly Spitfires?
Well,
to be that elite?
Certainly graduates or secondary school boys. My brother never had the education to get him in for flying training, but because he wanted to get selected and he had the Civil Air Guard experience behind him, he used to cycle to Abridge Airfield while he studied algebra and logarithms and things of that description to be able to get him into the RAF. And he managed to just scrape in on the examinations. And after that he studied and studied and studied, of course, far harder than a lot of the other boys had to do, because he hadn't had that education beforehand.
But what I want people to remember is 1939, the outbreak of war. I think it was expected for quite a while, wasn't it? It came as no surprise to anybody.
No, because in 1938, when my brother was able to join the Civil Air Guard, that was when it was expected, because it was a year of grace that we had as it happened, and we very badly needed it. But it was very well known by most people that it was coming.
But what we must remember, you're 85 years of age now, Bill.
Yes. And
you'll go soldiering on. They predict now that you and I are going to live to be over 100, so you've got a few Christmases left.
Well, only providing I'm compos mentis and I'm quite well with it. I don't think I want to go on otherwise.
No, but you're doing all right so far with 2 books under your belt.
Yes.
But what we've got to remember is 1939. It's a totally different place, Britain, in which to live. You're a child of 12. Your brother, really, age-wise, is not much more. He's 18, 19. You think people were made of different stuff, though?
I like to think so. I think we probably were. Our outlook was entirely different. We were very proud to be part of British Isles and part of the Empire. Everything was painted pink on the map when I was at school.
Was when I was at school, too.
Yes.
It's only recently.
But people would have to read my memoirs called The Way We Were, because it brings back so many nostalgic memories. And this covers all the period that I was growing up and my brother was growing up. And he had quite a career, a very charismatic character, the first thing he did was, when my dad was sent down to Littlehampton to look after evacuated children from London, was to fly over the Lido where they were and hit the flag mast on top of the building. So that was the big black against his character, something that you don't normally ever recover from.
Yeah,
and
he didn't get his CO's permission to do
the top knob
that.
of the flagpole was embedded in his port wing, so he couldn't avoid it. My father had to attend the court-martial as a prosecution witness because they proved that he's doing it deliberately. And, of course, fortunately, he managed to come back to fly after about 6 months.
Well, and so he was not a bad lad, but a naughty boy.
He was indeed, and that was a terrible blot against his character. But before they got to Burma, he won his commission, although he was an ace pilot by then, and he got a DFM because of it, because the officers got DFCs. But he not only was a squadron artist, but, as I say, he shot down German, Italian and Japanese planes, and the only probably Englishman to do it while serving within the same squadron.
Right, well, I tell you what, we'll talk some more about the distinguished military record of your brother, Len. Bill Smith is my interviewee, my companion for the next few minutes. We'll have a break for music. Is Bill Smith, an ex-paratrooper, and the book he's written, well, his memoirs are coming up to be published soon, but the book available at the moment is Birth of the Black Panthers, William S. Smith. You can find it at all good purveyors of the written word. Now, this book is about and dedicated to his late brother, Flying Officer Len Smith, DFM, very distinguished serviceman and pilot, and also dedicated to Sergeant Ray Johnson, who's still with us at 92. Tell us very briefly, Bill, who Ray is and was.
Ray I discovered through the Black Panther. My youngest sister desired a painting of my brother's favourite Spitfire with a Black Panther on it, and the artist held the type of thing that everybody looks at the town hall in Hornchurch. And one day an elderly gentleman came in and asked the curator who'd painted this picture, and the curator told him, the artist. He got in touch with the artist. He said, of all the Spitfires you ever painted, why that one? He said, because the pilot's sister wanted me to paint it. He said, did the pilot have an accident? He said, yes, he crashed in Scotland. He said, that was Smithy's plane. And immediately he phoned my sister. My sister got in touch with me. I excitedly got in touch with this gentleman who was called Ken Plumridge, and we actually visited him. And from that meeting, he gave me the name of Ray Johnson, who was a ground sergeant of 152 Squadron throughout the whole of the war. And Ray had a lot of information, and I managed to get in touch with him, and he gave me sufficient words to be able to write The Birth of the Black Panthers, because with his memories and my brother's diaries and his logbooks and letters, everything came together.
Excellent. Let's just go back to that day, that fateful day when your brother was killed. It's ironic, isn't it, considering all the action he saw, that he was killed at a commemorative display in a Mark 19 Spitfire on 20th September 1948. That must have added an extra sadness to it. He didn't die in action, yet he'd done so much.
Absolutely. And of course, this is all inside my memoirs, The Way We Were. The Black Panthers concentrates on the squadron, but at the end it does state that Len came home a flight lieutenant and led the Battle of Britain display at Lucas in Fife.
Now, watching that display was your brother's fiancée, Mary. She was expecting a baby at the time.
Correct.
You ended up falling in love with Mary and marrying her and taking her son, your brother's son,
Yes.
on as your own.
Yes.
Tell us a bit about that. That's a wonderful story. You didn't feel at all it was your duty to do that? You just fell for Mary?
Not at all. She was a lovely girl. There didn't have to be any duty attached to it. In fact, I thought she was too good for me. And I thought with the publicity she had, because she made front-page news, that somebody would soon come along and pick her up. But she met several people but wasn't that keen, until eventually she made the first overtures towards me. She'd come down to visit us because the family insisted my brother be buried at home in Romford, where we were, and she travelled with the coffin, so that we met for the first time. And it was the following April that I proposed to her, but unfortunately little Smithy beat us to it, and he came 2 weeks before we were married.
And how old's Smithy Junior now?
Junior is 63.
63?
Yes.
Now, let me just ask, because we've got to go to travel, then I'm going to ask you to read an extract from your wonderful book, Bill. As Smithy Junior has grown, do you see your brother in him?
Oh, very much, yes. In fact, he's also a very good artist, and he designed the cover of this book. And right in the middle, of course, is my brother Len, which is Terry's father.
Wonderful. Okay. Let's take a break for travel. Don't go anywhere, Bill. Interesting, this quote associated with Bill Smith's book, we should never forget the price they paid so we could be free, but sadly, it says, time goes by and people do forget. I wonder how many people who weren't touched by the war, I mean, I was born shortly after, but the aftermath lasted well through the 50s and 60s. Our generation was made to realise what those times were all about. I just contemplate sometimes, and it scares me silly, Bill, how different Great Britain would be had we not won the war, been successful in our endeavours.
Oh yes, we would be controlled even more than we are today, I would think.
Yes, be even worse, wouldn't it? Anyway, tell me about this extract you're going to read. It's in fact about Ray, isn't it? Ray Johnson.
Yes, the first extract is about Ray. It's the 152 Spitzer on a sortie, and most of the ground crew decided to enjoy a respite of chow and get cleaned up down in the village. This was where the station's cookhouse resided, alongside their sleeping quarters in the town hall. So he was ensconced with a small party left holding the fort. Ray thankfully removed his tunic to bask in the afternoon sun, resting his limbs against the bell tent that served as the squadron's ops room. It was about 4 p.m, and before long a couple of 109s appeared overhead. Types gave them a cursory glance, but fortunately they seemed to be keeping well away. Then quite by chance Ray spotted a dot in the distance, towards the southwest, watching it fascinated as it curved towards the earth and gradually getting bigger and bigger, almost mesmerised as it grew into a Focke-Wulf 190. One of the reserve pilots dashed from the tent, making for a nearby spit, yelling for assistance. All Ray had time to see was the spit erupt in a pool of smoke as he dived to the ground. He remembers vividly seeing these twinkling bright lights of the guns on the 190's wings, pointing straight at him. Nothing, he said, would ever erode that memory of those twinkling lights. Then the German was gone, screaming overhead and away. Bending to retrieve his battle dress, Ray shivered when he saw the tattered remnants with several bullets had passed through, leaving the waist belt hanging by threads. The tunic became a symbol of good luck, tucked into the bottom of his kit bag wherever he went, until, that is, almost at the war's end, it mysteriously disappeared.
Fascinating. That's just a short extract from Birth of the Black Panthers, a book by William S. Smith. And watch out for the memoirs, which are called what, Bill? The Way We Were?
The Way We Were, yes. Excellent. And that should be in production next month.
Thank you very much, Bill. I appreciate your time, too. And there's a phone number, a website. Are there other ways we can get in touch?
Yes, I've made a note here. You can phone direct to Melrose Books on 01353 646608.
Okay, we've got a note of that.
The Melrose website, which is called melrosebooks.com, under history.
Yeah.
And then locally at Waterstones, you could ask for Birth of the Black Panthers, and they would then get it ordered for you.
Excellent. Bill, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much again.
On BBC One, Andrew March.
And just another day. Bill Smith was my guest earlier on in the programme, as you'll remember, and he's inspired many people to get in touch. One of whom is Rob Brooker. Rob, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Thank you very much for getting in touch. You were inspired by Bill. We've just been looking at your website. Tell us all about it.
Basically, 17 years ago, I started a weekend project, just looking for something to do. I picked on RAF Warmwell, because it was obviously about the Britain Squadron, and it went from there, basically. I met Ray, and 17 years later, we're still doing it, finding people all over the world, putting guys back in touch with each other, you know. It's been an amazing 17 years of my life. Now,
the Ray that Rob is referring to is ex-Sergeant Ray Johnson. He's now 92, and he joined 152 Hyderabad Squadron for 1939-45, the duration of the war. What sort of man is Ray, Rob?
Very proud man. He lost his wife 16 years ago. He's been on his own ever since. He lives on his own now. He does everything for himself. His eyesight is now going, which is unfortunately. So he does everything basically. The man, well, you know, he's like a granddad to me. I phone him every week to make sure he's all right. You know, they are part of my life, a big part of my life. These guys.
So the purpose of the site really is to reunite old comrades.
The purpose of the site is to remember these guys. A lot of these guys are obviously forgotten.
Yeah.
A lot of the squadrons are forgotten. But obviously, you know, we've got a Mark 19 at the moment by a French gentleman who's flying it. So he's got the Panther on it. So it's back in the thing. The book came out as well. I've done a lot of, like, pushing the site and pushing, you know, finding the guys. We found guys in Canada, South Africa. We sent the book over to South Africa, to Major Harry Hoff, to Group Captain Gus Ardeline. They all flew with Smithy, so they all knew him, you know. And there was another chap up in Sunderland, so we sent the book to him. All on the website, you'll see all the pictures of the guys with the books, going right the way back. We've got probably about 400 photos going back from 1939. It's
so important we remember. Rob, thank you very much. Can you give us the address of your website?
Yep, it's www.152hyderabad.co.uk. If you put in 152 Squadron, it will come up to the top of the Google list.
Okay, but as Rob said, you can Google that particular information, but the web address specifically is www.152hyderabad, which is hyderabad.co.uk. Rob, long may you prosper. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Richard.
Cheers, mate. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.